Chapter 40. I stayed at the scene with Cassie Max until almost the middle of the night. I didn't bounce any more of my conspiracy theory off Cassie. She needed to focus on this individual homicide scene. Cleared murders are the currency of a homicide detective. No detective wanted a double homicide to go cold. The fact that there were two victims meant there was almost twice as many leads to follow up on, twice as much media coverage, and twice as much pressure from above to clear the case. I was confident in Cassie's abilities and intended to work with her as I developed more leads myself. I managed to wake up and get into the office early, and at midday decided I needed to check on my grandfather. It also gave me a break from the mountain of reports I'd been reading. I came in through the administrative offices of Holy Name and found my grandfather absolutely motionless at his desk, with his head to one side. His mouth was open, but he wasn't snoring. I approached from the door slowly, feeling a wave of fear rise up in me. I said his name several times softly. I carefully placed my hand near his mouth and nose, hoping to feel his breath. I wasn't sure, so I leaned in closer. As I did, his right eye popped open. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was clear and his accent sharp. That meant he was alert. I hopped back, trying to hide being startled. I also didn't want him to think I was afraid he had died at his desk. I said, "Just came by to say hello." Seamus said, "Why do you sneak up on everyone you want to say hello to? Go say hello to Alonzo back at the indoor basketball court. I want to finish my nap." I thought that was sound reasoning and headed through the rear of the gymnasium attached to the school. There was a spirited basketball scrimmage going on as Alonzo shouted encouragement from the edge of the court. When he saw me, he handed his whistle over to one of the assistant coaches. He extended his hand as he said, "How are you, Michael?" "Good." I almost had to shout over the noise of the game in the enclosed gym. Alonzo said, "Let's go outside where we can hear ourselves think." We walked to the edge of the school and then through a gate onto the sidewalk outside. It was a beautiful day. I enjoyed strolling under the trees that hung over the sidewalk. We ambled past the administration building where my grandfather was probably sleeping soundly again. Alonzo said, "I really respect how much effort you put into your family, even with such a high-profile job. Your grandfather is rightly proud of you." The thought of Seamus telling people he was proud of me made me smile, even if he never would say it directly to me. "I appreciate how you take care of him. God knows it's not always easy." He smiled. "It works both ways with Seamus. The church has been a big adjustment for me. Seamus understands that better than most. You're lucky to have had him in your life so long." I let out a laugh. I never thought of it as luck, but I have him in my life just the same. All over my life. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, and thank God for it. Chapter 41. I couldn't remember hearing anyone talk about sports at Holy Name with such enthusiasm. If we could bottle Father Alonzo's positive attitude, all the world's problems would be solved. We walked almost to the next block. Then, as we were about to turn around and head back to the administration building, I noticed two men turn the corner toward us on the sidewalk. Nothing seemed out of place. The calm atmosphere around the church and the cool breeze were too serene to pose a threat. Now the two men were directly in front of us on the sidewalk, about 15 feet away. One of the men, about 45, with sleeves of tattoos on both arms, casually reached under his shirt as the other man, younger and thinner, reached behind him. It was a classic gesture of pulling a gun. I was embarrassed I let them get so close to us. I just hadn't noticed the danger. The men kept moving and were almost in front of us. I only had time to deal with one of them. It was a dangerous choice to make in a split second. My hope was that the other one would be scared into running away. I closed the distance on the tattooed man just as his blue steel revolver came up in front of him. I blocked his arm with both hands quickly, then lowered my shoulder and hit him with everything I had. I don't know if he planned it or if it was just luck, but at almost the same moment, the man swung the gun wildly to get enough room to fire. The butt of the gun grazed me across the temple. I literally saw stars like I was a cartoon character. Now I had both men right next to me. Someone was either going to beat me again with a revolver or shoot me. Either way, I was in deep shit. I was dizzy from the blow to the head and backing away, trying to buy time. That's when I saw a movement to my right. It took me a moment to realize it was the graceful form of Father Alonso as he stepped into the fray. He took out the younger man with a hard right cross, knocking the gun out of his hand as he did it. The young man bounced off a tree and fell onto the sidewalk. That stole the attention of the tattooed man right in front of me. Now that I was already leaning down, I followed through by throwing my entire body weight into him. He stumbled over his friend. Alonzo faced off against the man with the tattoos, but I yelled, "Gun!" The single common police command whenever a cop sees someone with a gun. It was like a smack in the face to Alonzo, who, realizing the man was still armed, darted to the other edge of the sidewalk. Now my head was clear, and I reached back for the pistol on my hip. Both men were on their feet and running toward the next block. They realized this was not going to be their day. A green Chevy came around the corner. I focused on the man with the gun running from me. The driver of the Chevy opened fire with a small caliber machine gun. As a bullet pinged off a car and broke a window behind me, I ducked behind a parked Lincoln. Alonzo managed to leap over the wall at the edge of a courtyard between two buildings. I was shocked at how quickly he could move. Automatic gunfire tended to have that effect on people. I did a quick survey of the area to make sure there were no civilians in the crossfire. 2 women across the street were scurrying away, and some young men walking near the avenue knew it was time to lie flat on the ground. That came from experience. I fired 1 round from behind the Lincoln, and then the Chevy sped up. When it was parallel to me and the man with the machine gun had taken a break, I sprang out of my position and popped off 2 more rounds. The men who had attacked us piled into the car. All I could do was stare as the green Chevy Cruze with no license plate navigated the street. I was panting from the excitement and exertion. My head was pounding from the blow. I was wondering at what point I needed to start worrying about repeated blows to my head causing some kind of serious trauma. Then I realized I might have a chance. The car was slowing as it approached the nearest intersection. I knew this neighborhood. Even on foot, I might be able to at least get into a position to identify them later. Right now, I didn't relish the idea of explaining to a detective that I couldn't get a license number or a decent description. With great effort, I stood up, but as I started to run, I felt a hand on my arm. My head snapped to my left, and I saw Father Alonzo. "Don't be stupid, my friend. You'll get them later." I looked at the priest who had just beaten back a couple of armed men and dived for cover like he was one of the X-Men, and said to him, "Who are you?" My voice cracked from my confusion. He was like no priest I had ever met. The tall Colombian smiled and did a theatrical bow. "Alonzo Garcia, at your service." Chapter 42. After I got quizzed about the attack by a precinct detective named Toby Reed and his partner Brian Wong, and after I had answered a few questions from Harry Grissom, I knew exactly what I had to do. I tried not to broadcast my next move. I always liked playing my cards close to my vest. So I eased away from my lieutenant and the detectives, who were now badgering Father Alonzo, and made a beeline for one of the places I least liked to go in New York. I headed south to Lower Manhattan, past Little Italy. The FBI office was in Federal Plaza, on the corner of Broadway and Worth Street. The towering glass and metal building was a typical federal structure, without much flair or imagination. Subtle 2-foot-high decorative metal barriers surrounded it to thwart any potential suicide bomber in a vehicle. 3 NYPD Suburbans carrying armed SWAT team members sat outside the building as an off-duty security detail. They were there 24 hours a day. I needed to keep my visit as quiet as possible, so I had made a phone call first. I never did a favor for someone and expected it to be repaid, but in this case, I had to at least ask. 3 years ago, when Marion Wan's estranged husband kidnapped their 5-year-old son, she did what any smart FBI analyst would do and went to the NYPD immediately. I happened to be speaking with one of my old friends in the 105th Precinct near Floral Park in Queens when Marion came in, nearly hysterical. I was able to short-circuit some of the paperwork and figure out that her estranged husband, who worked for the New York City Fire Department, listed an emergency address on Long Island. It was the girlfriend he had left Marion for. An hour after Marion had come into the NYPD, I was honored to see a tearful reunion between Marion and her son. That's why she came out the front door of the office building and walked with me to the McDonald's across the street. After we had coffee and caught up for a few minutes, Marion read my anxious glances at her notes. She gave me a sly smile and said, "Okay, I guess you want to talk about your best friend, Alonzo Garcia." I said, "You may think you're being sarcastic, but right about now he is my best friend. Son of a gun saved my life, but he did it with skill and experience. I'm just worried about where he might have gotten that skill." Marion pulled open her notes and said, "I did all the usual stuff, public records, searched media databases in Columbia and New York. No arrest, and he's here on a work visa through the Catholic Church." Huh. Never even occurred to me that he'd have to have an immigration status. I guess I assumed the Catholic Church could fix anything. Marion said, "I had to go an extra couple of steps. I called our legat office in Bogota. The FBI has more than a dozen agents there. One of their senior people knows Garcia personally. You have my complete attention." The agent in Bogota knew Alonzo because he was a captain in the Colombian National Police. Early in his career, he fought the FARC rebels. Some people called them the People's Army. Then he focused his attention on narcotics. He worked closely with our DEA and has a ton of commendations. How does a guy like that end up in the Catholic Church? He was engaged. They were the power couple of the Bogota social scene. Then she dumped him. She dumped him for a bigwig in the Medellin cartel. The agent in Bogota said it shattered Alonzo. He sort of disappeared and then, a year later, turned up as a priest. Apparently the Catholic Church was worried about someone taking revenge on him, so they transferred him out of the country. So he really was trained in self-defense and tactics. Marion looked at me and said, "He is a certified badass." I chuckled, "And he saved my ass. From what I hear, it's not the first time he saved someone's ass." "Thanks. I owe you big time." Marion reached across and held my hand as she shook her head. "No, we'll never be even. I owe you my whole life. And this didn't even violate policy." I felt my face flush as she leaned across the table and kissed me on the cheek. Chapter 43. I stopped by the administrative office at Holy Name. For the first time ever, I wasn't there to talk to my grandfather. I wasn't even there to check on my kids. I was there to speak with Alonzo Garcia, former captain in the Colombian National Police, recipient of countless commendations for bravery and hard work. I led Alonzo out into the courtyard between the church and the school, knowing we would get some privacy there. He wore his clerical collar with a whistle dangling from his neck. Once we sat on the hard cement bench, I said, "I did some checking and know your history and what you did before the priesthood." Alonzo said, "I wasn't trying to hide anything. I'm just trying to move on with my life. I'm glad I was in a position to help when it mattered. It mattered, and you helped, and I appreciate it. All I'm looking for now is some insight into who I'm dealing with. How can I stop these killings?" "I wish I could help you, Michael. It's not that I'm purposely trying to ignore the issue, but I've seen this so many times before. I know that the killings will stop whenever the contracts are fulfilled. I may even know who the killer is. If they came from Bogota and they were active when I was working, I might know who they are. But the fact is, There are just too many possibilities. The cartels train kids to become killers. They hire contract killers who have a talent. They just have too many people willing to kill for money. I let out a heavy sigh. I was hoping you might have some detail that could help me. Alonzo said, I do know who likely trained this killer. How? Many of the sophisticated killers, the one who went to college and were bored with their former profession or just liked the challenge and the money, trained with a martial arts instructor in the Chapinero section of Bogota. He was a legitimate, hard-working karate instructor, and everyone who wanted to make a career as an assassin trained with him. He was known simply as Sensei Don. He taught the use of the blade. He advocated only 2 strikes, one to the brain and one to the heart. I've seen it over and over. I never trained with him, but other police have. This killer you face today has trained with him. If we went to this karate instructor, do you think he'd talk to us? He died some years ago, but there are many of his students still working today. I thought about it and said, that still doesn't explain the ambush and the 3 men who tried to shoot us on the street. That wasn't a single assassin. They weren't using some kind of stiletto. But that falls in line with their profession. Many of the hitmen from Colombia use local thugs on some of their hits. It makes sense. They're just subcontracting out the job for a fraction of their pay. So now I have an idea of what I'm up against. I just don't know who it is, how they'll try again, or how to stop them. Alonzo chuckled. Just like police work everywhere in the world. Chapter 44. I knew it was time to take this investigation to a new level. Harry Grissom listened as I explained everything, and considering that someone tried to shoot me in front of Holy Name, he agreed that I wasn't being dramatic. There was a conspiracy, but I had my own gang to help me stop it. It didn't take long for me to put together a task force of detectives and NYPD forensics people who were familiar with the case. I just needed some input for now. I made the trip across town to the office of the chief medical examiner on East 26th Street, across from the City University of New York. I spoke to an assistant medical examiner who had worked on Cassie Max's double homicide in Madison Square Park. He had worked in the ME's office for more than a dozen years and had given me insight on homicides I never would have gotten anywhere else. He said, I've made some calculations, and I think whoever delivered the strike stands between 5'7" and 5'10". They have some understanding of anatomy and are fairly powerful. I also looked at the other homicides you showed me, and I would have to say that the alignment of the bullet wound on the body confirms my estimate of the killer's size. What else do you have? I said, basically the killer is someone with enough resources to hire gunmen, enough guts to come after a cop, and enough skill to commit a double homicide in a park right in the middle of the city. The killer appears to be very professional by the way they've disabled security video systems and tracked their victims. I need all the help I can get. The assistant medical examiner laughed. If you have Cassie Max working on this with you, I think you've got a lot of help. She never seems to wear out. You know what we call her? I shook my head. The Terminator. Once she has you in her program, she never stops. Plus, she's not too bad to look at. You getting lonely locked away in here with all the dead people? I prefer it to wandering around a city filled with loud, obnoxious people. I went to Johns Hopkins. I could be a pediatrician in Baltimore if I wanted. I prefer the quiet, comfortable stillness of the morgue. I looked at him and said, I can never tell if you're pulling my leg or just plain crazy. Do they have to be mutually exclusive? That made me laugh out loud. You got any ideas about my case? I told you how tall the killer probably is, that they're professional because of the precision of their strikes. My guess is that they're very bright as well. I make that assumption based on their knowledge of anatomy, but I also know that detectives like you and Cassie don't let this shit slide. I figure you'll have this asshole in cuffs sometime in the next few days. I liked his confidence. I was trying to form a picture in my head of how calm a killer has to stay to use a weapon like that, getting in close to deliver such a precise blow to the victim. I also hadn't forgotten that a woman was probably involved in the murder of one of the gunmen who killed Antrol Martins. There was no telling if she was a local killer or perhaps someone who worked for the cartel. Once I had a puzzle like this in my head, I tended to shut out almost everything else. This time, I had to solve the puzzle before the killer figured out the puzzle of how to kill me. Chapter 45. Alex Martinez smiled broadly as she walked along Park Avenue South. She was coming from a lovely dinner with a mounted police officer, Tom McLaughlin. He was charming, sweet, and a full 18 months younger than she was. Not that it made a difference. She wasn't looking for someone she could raise her daughters with. She also wasn't interested in telling him where she was staying just yet. It was their first date. He had taken her for drinks at a sports bar called The Hill. It was a younger crowd, but she appreciated his showing her new places. Then they strolled down 3rd Avenue to a little Italian place named Bistango, and she tried not to slurp down clams marinara in an unladylike manner. After dinner, Tom calmly accepted Alex's decision to catch a cab back to her hotel. A quick kiss goodnight turned into just a little more, enough to make Alex wonder if she was making the right choice, leaving this handsome, horse-loving man for the evening, but it was for the best. After they parted, she wanted to walk instead of ride in a cab. That's when it happened. She realized she was getting sloppy. Someone was following her. She knew it wasn't the police. This was a pretty young woman with short dark hair, wearing a skirt no cop would wear, even undercover. This was something Alex had dealt with once before. In Madrid 2 years ago, some members of a local gang started to follow her. They were subtle, but not nearly as subtle as this young woman now. In Madrid, Alex simply kept walking until she found a police officer and chatted with him. It only took about 20 minutes for the gang to lose interest and wander away. Ironically, this time, she was coming from talking to a police officer, and she had no idea who would want to follow her. She worked out a plan in her head anyway. She turned east toward the river. She wasn't far from the United Nations building. Once she had gone a couple of blocks, she made another assessment. The woman was still back there. Alex didn't like to commit violence she wasn't being paid for, especially violence against a woman. She would do what she had to, but she didn't relish the idea of using her stiletto on this woman who was using a phone to call out Alex's movements to someone else. Alex led the woman down to the FDR Drive, then found a place to cross. She had the river on one side of her. Now she focused on what was coming toward her. Chapter 46. Alex was now on the banks of the East River, and she no longer saw the young woman who had been following her. That didn't mean she was no longer in danger. She sat on a bench to wait. A few minutes later, she saw the two men. Both men were young. One looked to be in his mid-20s and a little on the heavy side. The other one was tall and lean with long straight hair. Alex needed to draw them closer. She dug out her iPhone from her purse, leaving her stiletto and pistol within an easy reach. She pretended to be engrossed in texting, but in fact she turned on her camera and was watching the men as they approached. Alex made a quick survey of the area to ensure there were no witnesses close by. She even had a moment to enjoy the view of the East River and the relative quiet compared to the rest of the city. As the men came closer, Alex casually dropped her right hand to her purse and gripped her stiletto. She rested the stiletto in her lap and suppressed a smile as the men came blundering into her trap. She felt a change in her breathing, and her heart rate picked up. It was more excitement than fear. These were the types of challenges she had to overcome in her profession. One of the biggest things in her favor was the fact that men tended to underestimate a woman. That was their choice. She'd make them regret it. Now they were close. She could tell they were Hispanic. Her guess was that they were Dominicans. The heavier one said in Spanish, "Hello, beautiful. Why would you be sitting alone on a lovely night like this?" Alex said, "Unfortunately, I am not alone. I'm being bothered by a couple of assholes who showed up uninvited." The chubby man let out a laugh. "Show me where they are and we'll get rid of them for you." He looked to his thinner friend for support. The young man drew a long, fixed-blade knife from behind his back. His smile told her he enjoyed terrorizing women. Alex stood quickly, pressing the button to extend her stiletto as she came to her feet. The movement clearly took both men by surprise. She leaned back as the young man with the knife took a wide swipe at her. After all her training and experience, it felt like it took place in slow motion. But the young man meant business. It was a blow designed to kill her, and he had aimed it at her throat. Now she felt anger at the way these men would treat a person, not to mention a woman. She took 2 steps and let the men bump into each other as they tried to grab her. Now she stepped to the far end of the bench. She needed them to come to her. "I hope whoever you work for didn't pay you too much. You must be new to this." It was an insult, and, more important, it was an insult coming from a woman. She knew that would force one of them to come at her. It was the heavier man who moved first. He stepped forward, still unaware that she had a weapon in her hand. He reached behind him as though he had a gun. She wasn't going to wait to find out if he really did. Alex took a step to the side and then, almost like a ballerina, shifted her weight and stood up on her toes as she drove the stiletto into the man's solar plexus and up into his heart. She knew she had hit the target immediately. The way the man stopped mid-motion and the way his eyes went blank instantly told her he was out of the fight. As she stepped away, pulling the stiletto from his chest, the man crumpled and tipped over the low seawall into the East River. She couldn't have planned it any better. She had no time to admire her handiwork and immediately had to parry a lunge from the man with the big knife. It was a good thrust, but all she had to do was turn sideways and the blade missed her completely. She grabbed the young man's wrist with her left hand and drove the butt of the stiletto hard into his forehead. She caught him as he lost consciousness. She said, "Have a good sleep. You're going to need it." Chapter 47. I was sitting on the couch trying to hide how tired I was from Mary Catherine and Juliana. I was recovering, but the long days seemed to hit me hard in the evenings. I never wanted to say anything to the family because I cherished these evenings at home with the children, working on school projects, talking sports, listening to their dreams and hopes. It was magical, usually. At the moment, I was in a serious conversation with Juliana. I know that an 18-year-old in New York can legally make her own choices, but that's not what parenting is all about. I'm not naive. Sometimes you can't be the fun dad who always cracks jokes. This was one of those times. Juliana said, "You don't even know Cade." I said, "You mean Carter?" "I mean the man I'm currently dating." That stung a little bit. I didn't like to think of my daughters dating, but I was realistic. She was a beautiful girl, and now she was going to be on TV. I had to watch what I was going to say. "You mean the 26-year-old man you are currently dating?" So much for watching what I said. "I'm legally an adult. It doesn't matter how old he is." Now Mary Catherine leaned in and said, "This isn't getting us anywhere. Let's take a break and talk about it tomorrow." With that, Juliana stood up quickly and said, "Fine." She stormed out of the room and left me shaken. I looked at Mary Catherine and just shook my head. She put an arm around my shoulders and said, "She has a point. She is an adult. Maybe it would be better to give her a little space and not push too hard." It's just that I don't like to see my children make mistakes. I'm trying to save them from going through the same things I did. But we all make mistakes. I would think a man of your advanced years would know that by now. That made me smile, only for a moment. Mary Catherine was absolutely right, but I was still a father worried about his daughter. Mary Catherine said, "Is there something here I don't understand? Or are you just trying to set a certain bar for the other girls as they get older and start to date?" I dropped my head into my hands and admitted, "I just don't want to make the same mistakes I made with Brian." "What mistakes? You're a great father. You did everything you could to be a good father to Brian. Sometimes people make poor choices. They make mistakes. Hopefully they learn from them and move on. I think that's the position you might have to take with Juliana." "I know, that makes sense. I was just considering my other options." "Such as?" "Having one of my buddies arrest this young man and maybe losing him in Rikers Island for a few months. Is that a realistic possibility?" Mary Catherine let out a short giggle and hugged me. Maybe things might work out after all, if I gave them a chance. Chapter 48. Alex relaxed in a chair near the hotel room door, watching the unconscious young man tied to a chair next to the bed. It was amazing what a cab driver would accept when he was afraid your drunk little brother would throw up in his cab. This hotel in East Harlem looked like it was generally used by prostitutes and pushers. There was no hourly rate posted, but based on Alex's interaction with the clerk, any amount of time could be negotiated. By the time she walked into the hotel, her captive was stumbling along with her. She'd undone her ponytail and allowed her hair to fly wildly around her shoulders and face. The wide, dark sunglasses obscured what little part of her face was visible, and the $100 bill she handed directly to the clerk ensured that he didn't pay much attention. Now she waited patiently for the young man to completely regain his senses. He had lulled in and out of consciousness since they entered the room, and she'd secured him with the cord from a lamp. Then the young man's head snapped upright, his eyes open wide. He was much younger than she had originally thought, probably around 20. He was a good-looking boy with thick lips and a long, straight nose. She wasn't sure what to expect. Usually it was begging, and sometimes it involved offers of fast wealth if she would let him go. He went in a different direction and surprised her. He snarled with a remarkably clear voice, "You will release me right now? If you don't, you will regret your decision the rest of your short and miserable life." Alex was speechless for a moment. "Did I hit you too hard? You're not making any sense. You're the one who's tied up." "And you're the one who's not making any sense. I was thinking I might sleep with you until you started acting like such a bitch." Alex just stared at the young man. "I'll still let you suck my dick, but you better untie me right now." Alex said slowly, "I'm confused. Are you trying to scare me or make me think you're crazy?" "I am crazy, and you should be scared. You have no idea what I've done to all the women who disrespected me." "I probably have an idea, but I'm not one of those women. The only reason you're not dead is because I have a few questions. There's a chance, if you answer my questions, that you'll see the sunrise in the morning. But if you're going to keep up this attitude, I will not waste any more time." She stood up and made a show out of opening her stiletto. It still had his friend's blood on the blade. Alex saw his eyes open wide and realized she was on the right track. She knelt down in front of him and unbuckled his pants. She thought that was all she'd need to do. Then the young man said, "You better start sucking or you'll be the one who regrets this." She couldn't believe how some men acted toward women. She jabbed him in the leg with the stiletto, nothing too serious, but she still had to put her hand over his mouth to keep him from screaming. Then she tilted the chair back so his head banged against the bed. Alex put the point of the stiletto onto his groin and pressed slightly. The man let out a yelp. She knew he'd tell her anything she wanted now. "Why were you and your friend after me?" "We know you killed Cesar Ramos in the hospital bed." "Who is we?" "The boys in our crew." The Dominican gunman. There's no way you get away with this. One word from me, then you'll live in misery for a week before they let you die. But then I guess I better not let you give the word. When she was finished, she left the Do Not Disturb sign on the door and casually walked out of the hotel's rear exit. Now, she had another complication with this contract. Chapter 49. I arrived at the hotel in East Harlem about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No one in this neighborhood seemed terribly surprised to see police activity around the building. There were a few hotels in every neighborhood that attracted people interested in doing their worst. I chuckled at the cheap neon sign, Finelli Budget Inn, FBI. It had to be on purpose. I saw the young homicide detective I was looking for. Roddy Huerta was a solid investigator and had proved his reliability over the past few years. He wasn't particularly big on imagination or finding creative ways to solve cases, but he was a good cop. He was the new breed, young, fit, smart, and college-educated, but he went by the book on everything. I came from the school of investigation that said you had to clear cases and actually get murderers off the street. And to do that, sometimes you had to take chances. But this was his show, and I was just trying to gather information. Roddy glanced up from his notebook and pushed his glasses back onto his nose. He looked surprised and said, "Hey, Detective Bennett, what are you doing over here?" "Just curious to see if it's related to something I'm working on. What you got, Roddy?" He followed me as I walked into the hotel. Some detectives would be offended to have someone wander onto their crime scene, but I knew Roddy was more interested in showing me how smart he was. The younger detective said, "I've got a Hispanic male victim laid out in the bed. It looks like he'd been bound at the wrist and died from a single-edged weapon wound to the chest." I said, technically, to the heart. "Well, the ME will have to determine that. Why are you interested?" "Not the first I've seen this week." He perked up. "A serial killer? Drug war." He looked disappointed, and I understood why. He was one of those homicide detectives who worked a very specific geographic area and really didn't want to know about anything else going on. To catch a serial killer in an area like that would be something to crow about. Drug wars were a little more common. We stepped into the room, and I saw the forensics people wearing complete biomedical suits processing the scene. Roddy said, "It was a little tight in there, and the body had been in the bed at least 12 hours. I did my initial examination and decided it would be better to let the forensics people do their thing." "Have you canvassed potential witnesses?" "The clerk doesn't remember anyone coming in, and there's no record of this room being rented. There are so many patrons coming and going that we probably won't get anything useful out of processing it." "The victim moved from the Dominican Republic 16 years ago. He has 16 arrests and 4 convictions and has never done any prison time." Roddy looked at me and said, "And please don't just write this off as an Hispanic thing. Not all Hispanics are involved in the drug trade." "Did I say or do anything to make you think that?" "Sorry, just a little defensive." I looked into the room at the face of the young man with the gray complexion staring lifelessly up at the ceiling. I'd been looking at this as a homicide investigation, when in fact, it was more of a narcotics investigation. Chapter 50. If I needed to know something about narcotics investigations, I knew exactly who to turn to, Sergeant Tim Marcia. When I explained that I wanted to start looking at the homicides as if they were one big narcotics case, he understood immediately. That's how we found ourselves on Audubon Avenue, a few blocks from Yeshiva University in Upper Manhattan. We sat in a booth in the kind of cafe where all types of business are conducted, and no one pays much attention to who comes and goes. I said, "Who exactly is this guy we're meeting?" "John is what people call a regulator." "And what is a regulator?" "It's an odd little position in the drug world. Someone respected and trusted by all sides of the narcotics business. His job is to iron out disputes and keep things quiet and profitable. It's exactly the kind of job the NYPD would create if they understood anything about narcotics." "So everyone listens to him?" "Everyone except for the cartels. You can't tell them shit. They think they can run the world. The front door opened, and as soon as I saw the man step inside, something told me he had to be the regulator. He was about 50 and had spent way too much time out in the sun. His hair was brown with streaks of silver and tied in a long braid that draped over his left shoulder. He was dressed like he lived in the West, complete with cowboy boots and a plaid shirt. In New York, he would be written off as just another colorful character. A much younger woman stepped in behind him. She was stunning, with thick black hair and curves that seemed almost unbelievable. Even though he walked toward us, she sat at another table on the other side of the room. The regulator stepped right up to Sergeant Marcia and nodded as he sat down. Sergeant Marcia said, "Mike, this is the man I was telling you about." The regulator spoke with the raspy voice of someone who'd smoked since childhood. "Call me John. Everyone does." I looked across at the beautiful woman sitting by herself. "Is she with you?" "In a manner of speaking." He looked over his shoulder and waved to the young woman. She smiled and nodded her head. "She was provided to me by the Santos gang near Yonkers. The idea is to make sure I don't talk to the other side during a crucial negotiation." I said, "What negotiation?" "It would be unethical for me to disclose that. It has nothing to do with what you want to talk about." For the first time, I noticed a slight European accent. I had the distinct impression he didn't mind a beautiful young woman following him everywhere. I said, "I don't mean to throw a wrench into anything, but I'm curious as to why you agreed to meet us." The man took a moment, as if he was gathering his thoughts. "Sergeant Marcia understands the balance of the streets. You do what you have to do, and I do what I have to do. That balance is crucial to a happy life for a lot of people. I know about your issues with the Mexican cartel. Their use of a hitman and Dominican gunmen doesn't involve me at all. Personally, I avoid Dominicans whenever possible." I said, "You don't like their tactics?" "No, they don't pay me or recognize my value. Their existence should not affect me one way or the other, but if they try to kill a cop, and then the cops crack down on everyone, it hurts my bottom line. My job is to keep things quiet and profitable. Do you have any information that might help me help you do your job?" The regulator chuckled. "I like your view of things. Sergeant Marcia said you were okay. What I've heard is that 3 Dominicans tried to shoot you in front of a church yesterday. You were too fast for them. Do you know any of the men?" He slid a small piece of paper across the table. "I believe these 3 men were involved. At least 2 of them are cousins. They're not the kind of people to take failure like this well. I appreciate the information. We use it well, and maybe we'll both have an easier time of it. Good luck, Detective Bennett. You're gonna need it." Chapter 51. Back at the office, I wasted no time running the names the regulator had given me, not seeking assistance from analysts and other detectives. This was a lead I wanted to follow up quickly, without input from anyone else. All 3 of the men whose names the regulator gave me had a pass with narcotics violations. All 3 had done time at Rikers Island or upstate. Their photos looked familiar, but booking photos are notoriously difficult to match with faces you see on the street. In the photographs, all the men had facial hair. No one who tried to shoot me in front of Holy Name had any facial hair, but that meant little. What I found most interesting was that one man, named Julio Laza, had a car registered to him. A 1-year-old Chevy Cruze. My guess was that the car was green. Usually, someone trying to commit a crime, like murder or even armed robbery, goes to the trouble of stealing a car or using a rental. In this case, it seemed like the suspects were overconfident, thought they could pull off the hit with no issues and save the money they would have spent on a car. I considered grabbing someone to come with me as a partner. Then I thought about Antrol and decided that one dead partner was enough. This was something I was going to do on my own. When I had a couple of addresses and some information I could use, I scooped everything up and turned from my desk, then almost ran into Harry Grissom. My lieutenant said, "What have you got, Mike?" "Still trying to put some leads together. Just don't do anything stupid by yourself. I haven't since I was a teenager and discovered girls. Very funny, but I'm serious. I don't want you to get all vigilante on me. You've got a job to do. That job should include finding out who killed Aunt Troll. But I don't want to have this talk with someone else working on your homicide. Do I make myself clear? Crystal. 30 seconds later, I was out the door. As the regulator had said, I do what I have to. Chapter 52. Alex Martinez leaned in close over the elegant table next to a window at Central Park's Tavern on the Green. The colossal windows provided a grand view, mostly of tourists strolling in the park, but she appreciated that her new police officer friend, Tom McLaughlin, was trying to impress her. He'd used his connections to get them into the very busy tourist spot. He dressed well and had impeccable manners. That was hard to find anymore, especially in New York. He opened doors for her and held her chair, all the things he'd been taught as a child. She never would have guessed she'd be on 2 dates and 2 nights with the same man in New York City. She wasn't complaining. This was fun. A lot of fun. Tom had proved to be charming as well as attractive and energetic, and he loved the NYPD. He was almost an expert on its history. After their salads, Tom pulled out his cell phone and handed it to the young waiter. Would you mind taking a quick photo of us with the window in the background? Alex thought of all the issues a photograph of her might cause. She scrambled for a quick excuse. Finally, she said, Tom, can we take a photo later? A lady needs to put herself together before she's photographed. Tom laughed. Spoken like a true professional photographer. Crisis averted. For now. They chatted about horses and a little about their backgrounds. From force of habit in her professional life, Alex didn't mention that she had 2 daughters. Intrigued by what Alex divulged about her frequent travel, Tom told her about the international reach of the NYPD intelligence office. Alex said, How is that possible if they are New York police officers? I don't know the terms, but the city decided they were tired of relying on the feds to give them a heads up on terror threats. After 9/11, the NYPD started to open offices in countries that were tied to threats, mainly in Europe. We even have some uniformed officers at the Vatican during special Jubilee years. It's a cool job for a cop. Alex said, Is that something you want to do someday? No, if I'm not going to stay in the mounted unit, I'd like to go to homicide. That's where the sharp detectives are. I saw an article somewhere about an NYPD homicide detective. I think his name was Michael Bennett. Have you ever heard of him? Tom's face lit up. Everyone's heard of Michael Bennett. He's hot shit. He used to be on the hostage negotiation team. And he's the one who solved the case where all the hostages were taken at the First Lady's funeral. I remember that. Do you know him personally? Tom shook his head. I've seen him around a couple of times. He's got a great reputation, and he's kind of famous for having 10 adopted children as well. That was information Alex could use. She smiled and took a sip from her glass of Chardonnay. This was turning out to be a great date. Chapter 53. I struck out at the first couple of addresses for my potential suspects. I decided to call it a day and get home at a reasonable hour, though I wasn't nearly as tired and sore as I had been. I was finally starting to heal. I wasn't greeted by young children right at the front door. That rarely happened. As I stepped into the entryway that led to the living room, I was surprised by another man in the house. It took me a minute to register his face. He smiled, stuck out his hand, and said, "Hello, Mr. Bennett." I stammered. "Carter, how nice to see you. I didn't know you were coming over." I could be polite even to a 26-year-old man dating my 18-year-old daughter. I was still surprised to see him in my home. Just then, Mary Catherine hustled around the corner and said, "You see, we have a guest for dinner tonight. Your grandfather couldn't make it, and Juliana thought it'd be nice for Carter to meet the family." "Yeah, sure. It's great." I tried to put some enthusiasm in my voice, but failed. The young man melted back into the living room to talk to Trent. Mary Catherine stepped into the hallway and gave me a look that simultaneously said, "I'm sorry, and don't say a single mean word to that boy." I nodded in acknowledgement. She seemed satisfied and disappeared to supervise the process of setting the table and getting dinner ready. Once we'd said grace and everyone had been served, Chrissy, who was sitting next to Carter, looked at him with her innocent eyes and said, "You are old." I coughed up a little water trying to stifle a laugh. Mary Catherine looked horrified, and Juliana spoke up. "That's not very polite, Chrissy." Mary Catherine changed the subject and got Juliana talking about the production. She said, "We're going to have our first media interviews in the next few days. Someone is supposed to come by the set and take some photographs and interview us for an entertainment magazine." Bridget perked up. "Like Entertainment Weekly?" "Something like that." Fiona chimed in. "What's the magazine called?" Juliana hesitated, but Carter said, "The Brooklyn Studio Newsletter." Mary Catherine quickly said, "Oh, that's wonderful. It's so exciting. I could really see things coming together when I visited the set." I listened to the evening unfold. I understood that I had to get used to the idea of the dating world. I mean, I have 6 daughters, for Christ's sake. But the idea of this good-looking mid-20s millennial dating my oldest daughter bothered me. It made me think of all the stories I'd heard from other cops who had chased off boyfriends for one reason or another. My favorite was from a sergeant in Queens who answered the door with no shirt on and a badge pinned through his bare chest. That was hardcore. I needed to take another route. I said, "Carter, what are your acting goals?" All actors, like writers, love to talk about their future. To most of them, that future doesn't factor in family or romance. And off he went. "Oh, I'm moving to Los Angeles after the first season of Century's End is complete. I've spoken to an agent out there about representing me." The look on Juliana's face told me this was nothing he had discussed with her. Chapter 54. Alex Martinez was worn out, in a good way. She sprawled in the king-size bed in the tiny lower Manhattan apartment of Officer Tom McLaughlin. Aerobic energy could be as useful in sex as it was on the job. She was still smiling, listening to the gentle snores of her new lover. The whole night had been wonderful. Dinner at the Tavern on the Green, the stroll through Central Park, which included a visit to the stables. He was really a special guy. But one thing stuck in her head. She had asked about Michael Bennett, which might have been a mistake. It probably wasn't a big thing to Officer McLaughlin. He had gone on and on about the homicide detective. Now she tried to calculate all the ways that might come back to haunt her after Detective Bennett was dead. Would Officer McLaughlin remember the conversation and discuss it with the detectives investigating the murder? If so, did he know anything about her that could be useful? She never did let him have a photograph. She rolled it over and over in her brain. The sooner you handle a problem, the better things work out. She wondered if Officer Tom McLaughlin could be a loose end that could expose her later. She rolled over and slipped out of bed silently. She got dressed in the cramped space between the edge of the bed and the wall. She looked down at the sleeping form of Officer McLaughlin and reached into her purse for her stiletto. She hit the button, and the blade popped straight out of the handle with just a little mechanical click. She ran through her options once again. This man had done nothing wrong and did not deserve to die because of the mistake she made. But she couldn't risk someone coming to the ranch one day to arrest her and separate her from the girls. She closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of the city in the dark apartment. Sometimes she wished she was someone else. Chapter 55. Alex stood in the dark room with a stiletto in her hand, ready to make a drastic decision. Then she was startled by Tom McLaughlin's voice. "Do you have to go?" "I'm afraid so." "I need to tell you something, just so I feel good about where we are, and I don't want you to think I'm keeping any secrets." Alex just stood in the darkened room, wondering if she should say something like, "It doesn't matter," because it wouldn't in just a few seconds. Tom kept talking anyway. I didn't tell you that I have a daughter. What? I don't want you to think I was trying to hide something. I also don't want to freak you out, but I have a 3-year-old daughter named Emily. Are you married? No. I asked Emily's mother to marry me when we found out she was pregnant, but she wasn't interested. Now I have to fight hard to make sure I'm as involved in Emily's life as I want to be. Alex didn't know what to say. Tom said, I hope this doesn't change anything. I had a great time and I hope we can see each other again. To Alex, it did change something. It added something to her careful calculations. Suddenly she thought of a girl, not much younger than Gabriella, calling out for her absent father. Her father, who was a decent, hard-working man and didn't do anything wrong. He sat up in bed and reached for the light on the nightstand. Alex quickly dropped the hand with the stiletto into her purse. Tom said, Let me walk outside and get a cab with you. It's really not necessary. Well, I can't let a defenseless woman stand alone on a street corner in New York. A smile spread across her face. I guarantee you won't be letting a defenseless woman stand on the street. Go back to bed. Dream happy dreams. Alex leaned down until she was just a few inches away, the stiletto still in her hand. He looked up at her from the bed, exposing the underside of his jaw. She hesitated for a moment, then kissed him on the lips. She didn't say another word as she slipped out of the apartment. Chapter 56. I was still looking for the men whose names the regulator had given me. I had an address on 129th Street for one of them, Julio Laza, on the second floor of a rundown apartment building. As I circled the block to get a feel for the area, I noticed a green Chevy Cruze parked by the side of the building. When I got out and looked the car over, I found a bullet hole just in front of the driver's side door. Jackpot. Normally, I would call in assistance and arrest someone who tried to shoot me. In this instance, I thought it was more important to find out who had hired Julio. Not only would finding out who hired him be a bigger coup, I might also find some way to tie the information in with what Brian had told me earlier. Maybe that way, with a better lawyer, we could have his sentence reduced. I saw it happen all the time. That's why I was willing to take a risk today. A few minutes later, as I headed up the raw concrete front steps, I saw someone coming out the sturdy metal door. Immediately I realized it was my man, Julio Laza. He looked up and recognized me too. Why couldn't all cases be this easy? He wasted no time. Julio leaped off the entryway, jumping down 4 feet to the spotty grass surrounding the building. He landed on his feet and started to run, and he ran fast. I yelled out to him, I just want to talk! But he didn't believe me. Why should he? If I ran into someone I tried to shoot, I'd probably flee as well. When I was a rookie, I used to chase fleeing suspects on foot all the time. Then a veteran, not much older than I was, but with 4 years on the job, showed me the wonders of patience. He said it was always better to let rookies chase on foot, while he preferred a patrol car. I knew how jerks like Julio thought. He was going to run away and come back for his car. Guys like this never wanted to leave their rides. I acted like I was chasing him. I even let him look over his shoulder and see me fading in the distance as he turned a corner. Then I casually walked back toward his building and sat down behind a tree not far from his car. The rough bark of the trunk was covered in dozens of carvings, mostly hearts with names inside. I was not disappointed. About 5 minutes later, I saw Julio Laza jogging casually toward the Chevy. I waited until he was in an awkward position. He hadn't stuck the key into the lock of the door yet. Then I stood up. He didn't notice me. I stepped around the tree. He still didn't notice me. I was starting to get a complex. Finally, I cleared my throat and said, I wondered how long it would take you to get back here. It startled Julio so much that he dropped his keys under the car. He stood up, shaky from his run, hair plastered to his forehead. He said, What you want, man? Exactly what I told you before you went on this marathon. I just want to talk. He looked around nervously. No one wanted to be seen talking to a cop in this neighborhood. I said, "Come take a walk with me. We'll get out of public view and have a little chat." As he took a few steps with me, I put my arm around his shoulders as if I were comforting a child after he lost a football game. Julio said, "What do you want to talk about?" I stopped and looked at him. "You're joking, right?" Julio just shrugged and walked along with me. Chapter 57. Instead of taking Julio Laza to a comfortable cafe or a McDonald's to sit and chat over a drink, I put him in the passenger seat of my police car. He was shaking and sweating as if he were working a coal furnace. We drove to a parking lot several blocks away so no one would notice us, but Julio didn't care. He figured he was going to jail shortly if I didn't shoot him before that. Hell, he's the one who pointed a machine gun at me, and not a priest. When I mentioned that, I thought his eyes would pop out of his head. He said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It was just business. I didn't even realize the other guy was a priest. I never shot at him. I hope my mom doesn't find out." "Your mom is the least of your concerns. You shot at a New York City detective, and then you were stupid enough to be caught almost right away. Not only are you looking at a shitload of jail time, any kind of street cred you had is ruined." Julio was about 30 and average in every possible way. His brown curly hair could have used a shampoo, and the acne on his chin and nose made me think he didn't wash as often as he should. I said, "You're sweating. That doesn't do much to recommend a hitman." "Hitman? Hitman? You can't be serious." "You tried to shoot me yesterday. I can only assume you did it for money since we've never met and I never made a case on you." "Look, man, I don't think I want to talk to any cops right now." It was time to get serious. "You're already talking to a cop. Your options are very simple. You talk to me and tell me what the hell is going on, or you end up in Rikers Island, and I spread it around that you're a snitch." "What?" He yelped like I slapped him on the face. "The inmates will hate you because you're a snitch, and none of the cops will help you because you tried to kill a cop. I've never met anyone who was stuck between such a rock and a hard place." I saw him consider exactly what I was talking about. I sat back and let him think up the worst possible scenario himself. After almost 2 minutes, he looked at me and said, "Okay, what sort of information are you looking for? Who hired you to kill me, and why?" "I don't know all the details. It was my cousin who hired me. He needed someone to drive. I pulled out my old Mac-10 when I saw you were kicking his ass. I swear to God I was just trying to keep you away from them so they could get away." "Who's your cousin?" Willie Perez. But he was hired by someone else. I swear I don't know who." "What did Willie say about who hired him? Come on, I know we had to talk about it to get you to help." Julio stared at me like I was a witch who could read his mind. He looked down at the stained upholstery of my police car seat and mumbled, "It was a chick." "What?" He spoke up. "A woman. It was a woman who hired Willie." "What does she look like?" "I don't know. He just said she was beautiful. That was all he said, I swear." "Where's Willie now?" "I don't know. He lives in the same apartment as me, but I don't see him that much. He's got girlfriends, lots of them." I said, "I'll tell you the truth. I'm not sure how much of this is bullshit. None, I swear. I'm just sorry I shot at you." For once, I'm going to say it doesn't matter that you shot at me. The only thing that will help you now is to help me find whoever hired your cousin. I'm not making any specific deals. I'm not doing shit. Nothing until you help me. And let him digest that. Often someone's imagination will do your work for you. Julio looked up at me and said, "Okay, I'll tell you everything I know. I'm going to need you to try to set up a meeting with whoever hired your cousin." "I can't do that from a police car." "I'm going to go way out on a limb and give you a day to set that up. Don't say anything to your cousin about me yet. I'll tell you something. You don't want to cross me. You believe me?" "I swear to God, I believe you." Chapter 58. Alex Martinez spoke to Oscar, her contact from the Mexican cartel, on her throwaway phone to confirm that the contracts on the Canadians were complete. She threw in Alicia Toussaint's bodyguard for free. Now she was just tying up loose ends, like Detective Michael Bennett. Oscar said, "This is all good. We don't need to make statements with these Canadians in New York. They know someone is tracking them. If we need to, we'll send you to Quebec in a few months. Then we'll make a statement, like killing one of these pricks in front of his family or cutting off a few dicks. That will show them how far we're willing to go." Alex said, "That's another conversation. I was just calling to say things are almost wrapped up here in New York." The conversation was brief. All he said was, "Very good. That's why we pay you so much." When she told him she was tying up loose ends, she didn't go into details. The Dominican gang that had tried to kill her was the biggest loose end she'd ever had on a contract. She had an address for one of the men, and it would make a statement to kill him in his own apartment. This was as close to a personal reason for killing as she'd ever had. She was angry. The young man she killed in the crappy old hotel in East Harlem had been vile. His attitude and comments made her shudder. The fact that they thought they could eliminate her made her livid. Finally, she found the apartment on 129th Street in East Harlem. It looked like most of the other run-down apartment buildings in this part of New York. The city had planted a few trees in the grassy swath around the sidewalks, and about every other apartment had an air conditioner hanging out of its window. She stood on the corner for a few moments and took in the whole block. There was nothing out of place. Some children played in the green space in front of the building. Alex didn't want to be seen entering through the front door. She walked another block to look at the rear of the apartment complex and checked for video cameras. The surge in video surveillance and security had made her job more difficult. One of the reasons she was paid so well was that she knew how to adapt. In a neighborhood like this, there wasn't nearly as much video surveillance as there was in more affluent and commercial areas. The rear door locked automatically as soon as it closed. She watched as a couple of people came and went, each using a key to get back inside. An elderly woman carrying 2 heavy bags of groceries slowly moved alongside her. Without thinking, Alex said in Spanish, "Let me help you with that." She took one of the bags from the woman's skinny arms. The older woman smiled and said, "You have very nice manners. I don't see that much around here anymore." "Well, I'm not from around here." The woman reached out and touched Alex's cheek. "Good for you, sweetheart." After they walked for a minute, Alex realized she was headed toward the back door of the apartment building. Perfect. Sometimes luck did favor those who were prepared. It was natural to follow the woman in the door with the bag of groceries in her arms, and she even helped take it inside her first-floor apartment. The woman tried to hand Alex a dollar bill as a tip. Alex smiled and refused as she backed out of the apartment. She turned as if she was headed back out the door, then took the stairs out to the second floor. She found the apartment right next to the stairs and listened carefully for several minutes. There was no sound or movement from inside. She quietly tried the handle. The door was locked but loose in its frame. The old story. A cheap landlord who never wanted to repair anything. Alex retrieved her stiletto and popped it open. It only took one push in the right place by the lock to slip the door past the frame. She let it swing open silently. She stepped inside the empty apartment. Chapter 59. Sometimes even I was amazed at the turns my days could take. An hour ago I was talking to a guy who tried to kill me. I cut a deal no sane cop would make. I gave up an immediate arrest that would probably lead to 2 other arrests for the chance to land the big one. As long as I didn't tell anyone about it, I probably wouldn't get in trouble. Now I was downtown and meeting Mary Catherine for lunch. I had gone from talking to a guy who tried to kill me to talking with a woman who had saved me. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. I called her and asked her to meet me on the 7th floor of the Bergdorf Goodman department store in the little restaurant. She sounded shocked by the invitation, then blurted out, "I didn't know that you realized there was a restaurant up there." The BG restaurant was fancy by my standards, with big, ornate windows and stiff, formal chairs. The menu prices made me flinch a little, but I rationalized the midday splurge. The croque-monsieur made that rationalization easier. We sat at a small table overlooking Central Park near 57th Street. The view was spectacular, and so was Mary Catherine. Her beautiful face, framed by that lovely auburn hair and those clear green eyes that seemed to take in the whole world, made the view pale by comparison. It's too bad I could never put that kind of shit into words around her. Instead, I said, "You look great." She blushed slightly and smiled. "You always say the right things." We chatted about subjects we normally don't get to chat about: current events, where the kids might end up going to college, where we might go on vacation this coming summer. It was great. Then we ended up on the topic of Juliana. Mary Catherine said, "I really think you need to give her more room. By the way, that was a sneaky trick, getting Carter to admit he was planning on moving to L.A. I smiled. Sneaky or brilliant? She shrugged and said, "I guess it's a little bit of both. When you get a little older, you have to get sneakier. It's our only advantage." Mary Catherine wasn't swayed. "I want you to let her live her life, at least within reason. Carter seems like a nice enough boy. I wouldn't have a problem with him if he was a boy, but the fact that he's closer to 30 than 20 bothers me. Do you really think anyone would try to do anything stupid to any of your daughters after they met you?" I thought about it. Maybe I did come on a little strong sometimes. I changed the topic. "Have you thought about a date for us yet? A spring wedding might be nice." "No, I haven't thought about it." "I could be sneaky and trick you into it." "There's no need. It's just that I have so much to keep up with running the house. It's hard to take time to plan anything. I can't even think about our wedding right now." I said, "It doesn't have to be big and elaborate." "The hell it doesn't. If I'm going to marry the man I love, it's going to be way over the top. I mean, Barbara Streisand is entertainment big." I chuckled as I said, "What do you mean, if you're going to marry me?" She reached across the table and took my hand in hers. "When I marry the man I love. But right now I want to focus on Bridget and Fiona as they get ready for their first boy-girl dance, and Trent, the forgotten kid, who never does anything wrong, and Chrissy, who is taking this baby of the family thing a little too far." I thought about what she was saying. "I know you end up getting a whole family with me, a giant family. I don't want to stress you out anymore." "Oh, you silly, oblivious man. That's just it. I do get the whole family, the whole fantastic family. It's not a negative. I get to adopt each of the kids just like you and Maeve did. It's thrilling. It's more than I ever wanted. But right now I have cookies I have to get to Shauna's class for History Day, and then I'm taking Seamus to the eye doctor." I leaned close and kissed Mary Catherine. I had never loved her more than I did right then.